Good afternoon, and welcome to this third C3S Coffee and Chat conversation. I want to begin by introducing C3S and who we are. Community Connections Consulting Services, or C3S, is a community development consulting firm that serves organizations and entities across the US and actually internationally as well. We are in existence to help make a difference in communities, and we do so through providing professional expertise and consulting services to our clients. Today, we have two colleagues that are here to discuss AI and discuss AI from the lens of community development. We have with us today Dr. Naketa Jones. Dr. Naketa Jones blends over 20 years of experience and expertise in education and business strategy and has a focus on AI ethics and diversity right now. Dr. Jones holds a doctorate in educational leadership from Bowling Green State University, a Master of Public Administration, and a Bachelor of Arts, also from the University of Toledo. She contributes her knowledge by teaching communication and critical thinking and writing composition at Baker's College in Port Huron, Michigan. Dr. Jones is the founder of Ethical AI Solutions, LLC, where she crafts critical AI policies and provides safety and compliance support to her clients. She's also the founder of Human Driven Tech, which is a nonprofit that is driven to bridging the digital divide through software solutions and education. Furthering her commitment to ethical leadership in AI, she's currently pursuing a leadership professional and ethic compliance certification. Joining Dr. Jones and I, we have Dr. Dell Gines. Dr. Gines is a nonprofit executive and certified economic developer with over 15 years of experience in organizational transformation and economic development. As Chief Innovation Officer at the International Economic Development Council, also known as IEDC, he oversees the professional development, research, conferences, and program functions for that organization, which includes a $30 million EDA-funded Economic Recovery Corps program, which is a national program that places 65 fellows in host organizations around the nation to spur equitable development. Before joining IEDC, Dell led economic development programs at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. Dr. Gines is very accomplished, and we are very excited to have him join us to be a part of this conversation today as we talk about AI and its role and its place in community development. So let us begin. So this is a coffee and chat. So if you have your cups, I have mine with me today. Let's get them prepared to take a sip. I'll take a sip as we get going for today. So we're going to take some time just to make sure we set a context again about what AI is, how AI actually works. So Dr. Jones, I'm going to go to you first. You have done a blog that really talks about AI and some of the things happening in our federal spaces as well. One of the things that has happened in the fall of 2023 was an executive order from our president. Can you talk about that? You did share a blog about that executive order and your perspective on it. Can you share with our attendees what you learned about that and what your thoughts are about the executive order tied to AI from our president's office?
Absolutely. And I am excited to have this conversation with such esteemed colleagues. So, I want to go right into the executive order. So, October 30th, 2023, the Biden administration put out an executive order. And I really felt this is a step in the right direction because when a lot of these large language models, these algorithms, these AI systems were deployed, there were really no guardrails in place. There were companies that were at a race, it seemed, to put out all of these tools for the public to use. And so the EU has actually put out a lot of recommendations and stipulations in place. However, the US was kind of slow to develop these tools. And so, or these parameters that should have been put in place, I believe, a long time ago. So it's a step in the right direction because the executive order really speaks to how the public should be protected. Safety, privacy, non-discrimination. And so it was a step in the right direction, but no real parameters were put in place from this executive order. Again, I think it's a good thing, but I feel that this is kind of being left up to the states to really make these decisions. So New York and California were actually the first states to really put out some clear parameters, making sure that these systems are audited from third-party auditors, making sure that, again, that these protections are put in place, that these systems are supposed to be kind of overseen in a sense from not just the people who create them, but people who are invested, like the public, to make sure that the public are protected. So basically, the Biden administration put out this talent surge, it seems, on AI.gov. So they want to make sure that they are protecting the rights of its citizens, but also making sure that the US is kind of taking a stance on understanding what AI is and putting some parameters in place, but not clear guardrails.
Dr. Jones, can you again break down AI and how does AI take information and data and turn it into something that is then generated to be pushed back out to us? Share with us the inner workings of AI. How does it work, very practically speaking?
Absolutely. So AI is a subset of an algorithm. So it's a computing system that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. So AI literally mimics human intellect. Then we have machine learning, and I'm not sure if you've heard of machine learning, but machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. So it enables computers to learn from data and improve their performances without the programming each task. So think of codes as being the task. When we want a algorithm to do something, we have to code it. And so when it's coded, machine learning actually starts to generate without having to code each individual um, task. So for me, the human intellect is the advanced model that there is. It's the original model. So the human intellect is the ability to control for ethics and morals, desires, and advancements. It's the core functioning of our emotion, the spiritual heart-based motives that actually control for justice and the fair treatment for every one of us. So I want to just kind of say that algorithms are basically math and code, but they are created by humans to interpret phenomenon, and it is trained by humans who use it. Think of being as bias being baked in the cake, sort of sense, so to speak. So if we can all agree that humans have this inherent historical bias, right? And humans code data, then code can be inherently biased. So I want to challenge you to kind of think about some of this, and maybe we can talk about this. Where do you think the bias could be? Think of the time that you've used a chatbot or some kind of large language model, and thinking of the ways in which you used it, where do you think some of the bias could be? And also I want you to think about this. Who's literally liable if these tools actually harm someone? So say if a chatbot discriminates, who's held liable? Who should be held liable?
Thank you for that, Dr. Jones. Dr. Gines, did you have any thoughts or feedback on what Dr. Jones has shared?
No, I think I really appreciate your thoughts on what could be done from a policy perspective and those roles that need to be in there. Because usually in technology, we tend to focus on the tech, but not the implications of the tech across these systems. And so you tend to see, a lot of people doing things without respect to bias, like Dr. Timnit Negru, who got terminated from Google for lifting up some of these concerns, was saying, hey, we heard the situations where they put all these recognizing light bulbs in and different things, and they weren't recognizing Black people. Well,
Yes.
so we just got to walk in the dark now. So it's these kind of things that you wish they were self-learning, but this is part of where it goes into the labor market, the labor force of people that are designing these things or owning and control these things, and they are not Black and brown people.
Yes.
Of course, the tech industry is over-indexed significantly towards whites and a high representation of Asians. And so some of the things that we would experience, think, or feel are often not present when the conversations of how these things are designed are actually created, from scratch. And the owners don't have too easy as well. So there's a lot of work to be done on that, and I think we need to figure it out. I mean, the cat's already out of the bag, but the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So there's that, and I think I don't want to get too sci-fi, so let's just keep going with the questions. I may get sci-fi later.
I love this. I love the sci-fi conversations. Those are always telling. I wanted to, what's interesting though, Angeline, is as I looked back on AI.gov today, actually, and I was thinking maybe I'll see some jobs out there that are specifically targeting or dealing with the ethical implications, the bias, the needing to address minority-based issues. When I went onto the job site to kind of see if there were any positions, there were none. There were data scientists, and it seemed like it was, like I said, the race to be one of the leaders in AI development, but I question the race to be one of the leaders in the ethical, inclusive initiatives that I think Americans need to take.
And this is important because when you understand the systems in which we live in, corporations have a history of going up to the limit of regulation and often beyond. So you can't just assume that leaving something up to the market to correct itself is going to lead to optimum outcomes, especially not in this scenario. And when we talk a little bit more about maybe the future of artificial intelligence, we can dive more into some of the things that I've heard that make this a unique technology across in human history, literally. And so for me, it's like if I know, OpenAI say, well, wow, yeah, we created our organization as this unique structure to be able to do this, but then you turn around and you have Microsoft as an investor. Well, the first thing I was taught when I was getting my master's in finance, actually my MBA, which was before that, was corporations exist to maximize shareholder value. So if shareholder value was known as shareholder primacy is the primary motivation of corporations that are publicly traded, then you can reasonably expect that any corporation that is producing artificial intelligence, and all of the ones that are really pushing the envelope now, NVIDIA, OpenAI, whichever one is out there that is, has investors, is only going to do regulation that they have to do, because any self-regulation, which they may do, would only be done in the best interest of their shareholders, not the total mass of the population. So these are critical conversations that we have to think about from a policy perspective as to what is the appropriate regulation of artificial intelligence as an industry.
Absolutely.
I'm really glad we are raising this point. We are all involved in careers that touch people directly, touch people's lives. And to know that AI is such a powerful tool that is really having a surge in its utilization, you have to be mindful of the ethics of it. And you can't disconnect the two. It can't be just about the advancement of the technology, which of course we need to do, but also has to be a mindfulness of the implications of how that technology impacts lives, which is what we look at and do every day in our respective spaces. So thank you both for raising that. So today's conversation is about AI and community development. And I decided to do an exercise since we've been having all this conversation about ChatGPT and AI. I said, well, first of all, we have to understand what exactly is community development if we're going to talk about its implication and connection to AI. So I did what we've been talking about. I decided to take a look at ChatGPT and utilize it to define what's community development. And we're going to actually do a live of presentation of what it tells me. What is community development?
There you go.
All right. Well, let's see what ChatGPT has told us is community development. Community development refers to a process through which individuals and groups work together to improve the social, economic, and environmental conditions in their local area. It is a holistic approach that aims to empower communities, enhance their quality of life, and promote sustainable development. Community development initiatives typically involve collaboration among community members, local organizations, government agencies, and other stakeholders. And then it breaks it down even further with the 7 key aspects: empowerment, social inclusion, capacity building, sustainable development, collaboration and partnerships, asset-based approach, participatory decision-making. Okay, do we feel that this captures a really good summary of what community development is? Dr. Gines, what do you think?
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, the community development is such a multifaceted, field that you could probably make a case that a lot of these are in some aspect of community development for sure.
I can agree with that. I will share, I tried this exercise earlier, and when I first put the prompt in, it was the same question: what is community development? It gave me the first portion, the first paragraph there, that summary. And I said, well, I want you to go deeper. I said, tell me more. And then in my second prompt, it gave me the rest. I find it interesting that it learned me. So now when I ask the question, it automatically gives me all of it that I had to keep crying to initially get. And I suspect that as I continue to put in more questions tied to this, or more follow-up questions to this, it will begin to understand the depth of what I'm looking for, and will present immediately that information with more detail.
And Angeline,
So, yes.
I just want to give you an example that I've actually had a couple of arguments with ChatGPT in my day. So, and it's really interesting if you get to a point where you're asking it something and it gives you something that you don't agree with, and you ask it something again, sometimes it will contradict itself. And when you call it on its contradictions, it will then apologize and try to correct it. So that's part of the training that comes in. And I find it very interesting. So, especially when you go into those deep, probing questions, it tends to sometimes, kind of say something that is contradictory to what it said before, which is very interesting.
That is very interesting, especially if people are utilizing the software to make a decision or to make a analysis of something, to recognize that it will contradict itself. It's not the authority, though people may take it as an authority when it gets responses back. Dr. Gines, have you experienced that in utilizing ChatGPT or any of the AI softwares?
Yeah. Oh, I've cussed out ChatGPT a lot.
I
Well,
have as well.
and honestly, it's not my favorite tool. My favorite tool is Claude. It's better, and now the new version that they just came out with is beats ChatGPT and all of the languaging stuff, and it's add new functionality. ChatGPT's benefit is it's the multimodality, which for the audience means all of the things that it can do with different plugins and et cetera, which still gives it a competitive advantage. But in terms of straight writing, I'm not impressed with it. So when you look at it, remember it's an interactive exchange, which is what makes it unique than, let's say, a web search. If I go in and I say, what's community development on the web, what is it going to do? It's going to give me a whole bunch of links that then I would have to go in and explore. But these large language models are drawing from all of these huge sets of conversations that have been had all across the web, and other sources to try to identify and sort what is the best potential answer. So just like there may be a range of answers in the general public space, ChatGPT or whatever is trying to source down and distill it into the best answer as it currently exists. And therefore, if you challenge it on it, like I'll almost say, no, you made a mistake. This is not accurate. It forces it to go back and look at, kind of its training set and then come back and try to adapt to it. And this is what makes it a unique technology. It's not I put in and I get out. It's I put in, it thinks, it reflects, it puts out, and then I say something different and it puts out and reflects on that. And so it's this kind of iterative engagement, with the technology that makes it so unique.
That is really interesting. I think it's really telling too. It's interesting that it's a tool that's learning how to work as you utilize it. Yet it's a tool that's also utilized to do work for us and with us at times too.
That's something Naketa said. So she talked about bias in the algorithms. So go through, when you get your doctorate degree, this is one of the things that I learned. And when I talk a lot about knowledge systems, and there's a parallel in the way these large language models are trained. So in when you get your dissertation, at least in my public administration dissertation, you have to do what is known as a literature review. And in the literature review, what you're doing is you're justifying or you're giving context to the topic you want to research by looking at the historical literature and saying, see, this is how it developed. Now, when you do that, though, what you find is that especially in American university education, that is biased towards white, often predominantly male scholars. So people that weren't necessarily answering questions from our perspective, that weren't looking at the world from our worldview, and were writing and answering questions, even if it was related to us from, let's say, a Eurocentric viewpoint. And so when you look back at the way the knowledge system developed and what is considered an authority on a topic, it's by and large built from the structure of white academia, white male in particular academia. And so when you don't have people that have historically been answering the questions or coming from the perspectives that, let's say, Black or brown populations want to have, the knowledge system is incomplete, yet we hold that knowledge system up as the body of knowledge for, let's say, public administration, my field, or education, Dr. Jones's field. And so AI is the same way. It has these huge gaps in it because where it gains this knowledge is from, let's say, the internet. And who has been populating and putting content on the internet, especially from an English perspective. By and large, when you look at who controls the companies, who controls the encyclopedias it's drawn for, all of these different things, it's the same principle. It hasn't been trained by people of color and on issues of people of color, and any bias that would be on the website. The web, it's also got trained in that. So when it spits things out, it's not necessary. Like if you ask what community development is, it's probably not a problem. But when you start talking about certain things, let's say on other topics that could be around race, gender, class, or others, it's going to only, at this point in time, spit out what has been trained. It's just the same as a kid. So if a kid is raised in a racist environment and we ask him a question on what it means, what do you think about those Black people over there? Well, what's the natural inclination? It's probably going to say something that probably isn't the healthiest for race relationships, right? So AI can have those same challenges, which has been lifted up, and they're trying to correct for it. So we have to understand why we need to continue to engage at AI, both as users, which there's a whole different argument for that I have, but also from a growth standpoint. We need to be able to populate it, train it, allow it to understand who we are, what we think, the way that we experience the world, so that it has a more balanced, perspective when it talks about some of the issues that are going to be asked.
And I want to point out during dissertation writing, we had to write towards our own bias, right? We had to list what kind of bias do we have, or do we approach our research before we even start the research in the first place? So I question if these creators have actually identified their own biases before they created these tools as well. I don't think so. Like you said, the market really calls for just quick deployment and quick money. But you're right. We have to, as users, input these issues that they have to account for when it comes to biases.
Before we change, can I give you one quick real world example? So Microsoft has something called DALL-E, which is an AI image generator, meaning you can put in a prompt and you can get a picture, from that prompt. And I said, okay, put a picture of a wealthy person, and it posted a picture of a wealthy white person. I think it was like in a suit, all of that, maybe some money in the background. I said, give me a picture of a wealthy black person. This is true. I posted on Facebook after it happened. It gave me a picture of a pimp with a gold chain. I
Wow.
said, give me a picture of a wealthy um, Hispanic person. It gave me a picture of like one of the three amigos, with a big sombrero, the lutador. I can't remember the name. The ones that play the guitars with
Yeah.
gold. And then the third, as I said, give me a picture of Asian wealth. It didn't have a picture of anybody. It just had gold and crowns and all of that. And so that's one primary example of what I'm talking about right there. Hopefully they cleaned it up since I did that. That was about 6 or 7 months ago. But that's an example. It had to draw that imagery from somewhere. And in
Yeah.
drawing that imagery and showing it back, it inherently had some racist imagery based upon a simple prompt that I gave it.
That is so concerning. That is so concerning. We talked about how AI is something that is still emerging, but there's a rush to utilize it and employ it into how we do what we do. And from the community development space, it is being utilized to make decisions and to influence how government, how businesses, how organizations respond to community needs. And if we're talking about community development, there's so many, as Dr. Gines mentioned earlier, so many directions you can go with what constitutes community development. But I think we can easily agree on some primary areas of community development, such as affordable housing, such as transportation, such as economic development and workforce development. So let's have some focused conversations on those areas and how AI is manifesting. And we're going to start with affordable housing. So if we're having a conversation about affordable housing in the United States, you cannot have that conversation absent of consideration of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, that has the charge and responsibility for furthering affordable housing opportunities within our nation. On the HUD user site, just recently, just back on February 20th, they posted a blog that was entitled "Using AI to Promote Equitable and Affordable Housing." And the blog talked about the deployment of AI and machine learning to support housing and how it's posed to accelerate the use of AI in housing and how housing is developed in our nation. It talks about that this new technology offers policymakers a significant opportunity to be more efficient and more responsive to residents' needs, ensuring that this technology is set up to advance equity and fair housing and affordability. And it also talked about how just this past December, the National Council of State Housing Agencies hosted a symposium that specifically looked at housing and AI and the interrelationship and the utilization of that tool in housing. Also, we talked about AI and its use with HUD in the housing space in the US. This is something that's happening worldwide as well. The World Bank had a recent blog that talked about what AI can do for affordable housing in emerging markets. And it talked about how AI can be used for data analysis. It could be used to help promote housing in emerging markets through building information modeling and simulation tools. It talked about housing and access to housing, utilizing AI for informal households to be able to access finance for housing, and also utilizing AI to make housing greener and more resilient in response to climate change. So all of these pivotal aspects of housing and housing accessibility and housing affordability, and this movement to utilizing AI to be able to advance and address these things. We just had a conversation about some of the deficits, major deficits of AI, in that there are biases that are embedded that we're still working through. How do we reconcile the fact that AI is here, it is activated, it is present, it's being utilized on these very key foundational aspects of life, such as housing and affordable housing and housing accessibility and affordability, yet it's still so much to be learned about it, so much that needs to be embedded into it to ensure it's fair and equitable. How do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile the fact that AI is here, is being utilized, yet there's still so much to be done? And here it is, we're looking at how our major governmental body, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, major world entities are already utilizing AI and how it's serving its population. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are you got to define terminology, and these are all contestable terms. So if I asked you to define equitable, you would have your definition. My definition would maybe different from that. So there's still that human philosophical, ethical, definitional need for all of these terms that we say, even affordability. If you look at the definitions of affordability, people will look at that a different way. And then strategically, I've always argued that the best way to I've always argued that you can never create enough affordable housing to meet the demand in the marketplace. As such, the best way to deal with affordable housing is to generate economic growth for the populations that can afford it, or to figure out a way to reduce prices, which is a macroeconomic concern that we probably can't get at. So if I ask, so again, if we look at, I'm not so much worried about bias in that regard, unless I'm asking AI what equity is. If I'm asking AI what equity is, yeah, maybe there's some bias. If I'm using it very much as a technical tool, like a technical analytical tool, which is what a lot of people are using it for. So if I define equity, this is my definition, and affordable housing, this is my definition. I got my two definitions squared away. Now I say I'm going to go into this community, and we're going to do equitable and affordable housing based upon these concepts. I've created a framework by which the artificial intelligence can operate from a technical standpoint. And then we can load in like the analytical data on demographics, let's say labor market trends, location, transportation patterns, all of that, and take a lot of the sophisticated data, put it in the machine, and then ask it questions and have it, do some advanced analysis of it. But I still have to define my terms as a human as to what these things mean. And so this is where it gets back to what did you say, Dr. Jones, in your opening? You were talking about the human. You added a variable, a human something.
Yeah, so the human intellect, the
Yes, right
ability,
there.
right, yeah, the ability, the emotional part, the call for justice, the parts that these machines don't do well, but humans do.
And so that's it right there. Like that still has to be present, because we don't want to get to the point of allowing artificial intelligence to define what our morality is or what our ethical consideration is. Those are philosophical concerns that we need to have through a democratic system or some other form of consensus building. And so when we have models, like all of these things, they're saying we want to use the models this way, but we can question whether even their starting point is correct. We can question whether they should be looking at affordable housing or equitable development as a primary driver of affordability for housing. Because affordability simply means you can't, in my definition, it simply means that you can't afford X amount of housing costs at Y amount of income. So you can go about it two ways. You can reduce the cost of housing, or you can increase income. We over-index towards reducing the cost of housing, but you have all of these issues that AI cannot solve. It can do something. It can create new types of housing development and new strategies, but if fundamentally the cost of production is great and sales is greater than the cost of your income and disposable income or housing income, it doesn't matter what you do. You're always going to have this need.
Thinking again about the practical implications of AI and utilization of AI in systems in community development spaces. We highlighted earlier in our conversation about affordable housing, just some of the ways that AI is being utilized already to be engaged in that space. We talked about how data analysis, AI is being used for data analysis when it comes to determining characteristics, socioeconomic characteristics of households, and in turn programming and initiatives and supports available to households. AI is being used to create simulation tools to understand how environmental phenomena impacts physical buildings and how to respond. AI is being used to determine financial opportunities and availability and accessibility for household, we already know with the credit system, for mortgages and lending. AI is being used for looking at the impact of climate change on our housing systems. We have shifted to transportation, and just to share some of the practical ways that AI is already being used in a number of our communities. There was in Los Angeles just recently acknowledgement that they're utilizing AI to be able to identify those who are illegally parked in bus lanes and to be able to ticket those individuals or those cars utilizing the system and technology of AI. You all have already touched on utilizing AI to determine bus routes and scheduling and optimal scheduling based on anticipated demands that the system tells planners is most ideal. Utilizing AI for addressing instances of crime on buses and identifying those who are allegedly involved in situations through facial scanning is another way it's being utilized. It's being utilized for voice recognition, natural language processing to assist in communication with riders in various languages utilizing AI. It's being utilized in our public transit system for fleet utilization and capacity, determining number of buses, passenger demands, how to deploy buses as well. So again, AI is already being utilized in these spaces which have direct impact on our communities. As we think about another major aspect of community development, let's switch over to economic development and workforce development and how AI is showing up there. In a previous segment, we talked about AI in education, and I lifted at a call for proposal that went out at the end of last year from the National Science Foundation, which is a major funder for our research and academia at all levels, from pre-K through elementary, secondary, post-secondary universities and colleges too. And they are currently seeking out proposals for how to prepare our students for the workforce, recognizing the relevance and prevalence of AI. Also in our education system and in how we do the work that we do. Dr. Gines, I'm going to look to you as our representative from the International Economic Development Council, and one who has been involved in economic development for many years. Can you speak about AI and how it impacts our workforce? And are our students prepared for the realities of this new workforce that is so inundated with AI and AI technologies? How does that impact our workforce?
In 2 words, a lot and no. Is going to impact it a lot if they're not prepared. So when you and I read these things and they say, oh, global domestic GDP is going to increase global GDP by X amount, and yes, there's going to be some labor market friction, but overall the productivity of it. And so I want to give you and your audience a couple of things to think about. So when you start looking at the labor market and the wage rate compared to the global United States economic productivity, what you see is the wage rate has went like this, productivity has went like this. Well, what does it tell us? It means that more productivity can be occurred with less of a return to the dollars to workforce. So if you look before that, they were, somewhat flat. So we were in a manufacturing society, okay, productivity and wages, and then it goes about 70s and it goes shoop, and now you look at the wealth gap and the stratification of wealth in the United States and the continued aggregation of wealth to the top 1 to 10%, and everybody else is flat. Well, to me, I can't take anybody seriously who tells me that this technology overall is going to do anything but exacerbate those problems. Why? Because what does artificial intelligence do? It allows me to have more productivity with the same amount of workers. And so if I can get 2 times the productivity from you in the labor market with AI as I did before, then am I going to pay for 2 people to increase productivity? Maybe. But what I'm also likely to do is to cut that other person out, right? Because I now can have one person do the work of 2. Now, when we look at where the labor market, where these things are now hitting, it's hitting in an area that I don't know, and I could be wrong. Again, I'm not an economist, but this is the first time ever I felt where technology has dramatically had the ability to impact the white class, the not white class, white collar worker, right? So historically, a lot of technology has impacted blue collar worker, your manufacturing line, the efficiency, all of the things that came out during the industrial era and into the manufacturing era, right? Now we're seeing artists are being disrupted. The people that have the ability to do, let's say, advanced analysis like finance folks are being disrupted. Oh, that kind of class is being disrupted. So you have this massive potential for productivity increase, all the things that we've been talking about, which requires less of the labor market. And in the short run, people will say, and I've heard people say, well, then it's not really going to be, jobs are not going to be that impacted. What's going to happen is the jobs are going to go to people that learn how to utilize AI. And I'm like, maybe early on, but if it's developing the way that people are saying it's developing, autonomous, iterative, the ability to have agency, all of those things, it indicates that at some point you stick that artificial intelligence into a robot. Now you no longer have to have a construction worker. We say, oh, the vocational trades won't be able to be disrupted. We got plumbers. Plumbers are safe. Electricians are safe. You put that AI into a robot, because robotics is one of the other arms of developing technology along with blockchain. You put that AI into a robot, and all of a sudden it's your plumber. We're about to not need taxi cab drivers, Uber drivers, bus drivers, truck drivers, because we're already testing those things. And so I think we need to look at how our economy is structured. We need to look at who owns things, because right now, the people that are most impacted by these things currently and in the near future will be people that have a lower ownership rate. So we're not even being able to recapture the wealth side of it as these stocks grow. I don't know a lot of Black people that own NVIDIA stock. Because of this other fundamental and historical lack of training and financial education, other things like that. And so it's going to have my prediction only, my alone, a huge impact on the labor market, which is why I stress the need for entrepreneurship, even now more than I've been doing the last 10 to 15 years. Entrepreneurship, asset ownership, owning stocks, in these places, being able to participate in the innovation economy, or the pieces that move into that place, are going to be critical for people of color, because equitable development ultimately comes down to your ability to equitably participate from an ownership standpoint. The income standpoint is secondary to the ownership standpoint. And this is where we need to be able to move, because I feel personally, it's coming like a tsunami, and people are acting like that impact isn't going to be great. And I really hope that it isn't. But one thing that we've known historically, and I don't see this as any different, even though it's going to hit white class workers for sure. I did a basic analysis, early stage analysis, and I need to go back and do it, so don't quote me on it. My biggest research was on Black women entrepreneurs. And so I was just playing around, and I said, okay, I went to some of the reports, I think it was McKinsey and whatever, and the areas where it was going to be, said the labor market was going to be able to impact it most. Then I looked at Black women who were 75% clustered in the 4 industry codes. And I said, let's look at these, and what is the impact going to be? And they said, yes, this is ChatGPT. And of course we need to vet it, but it said, in that basic analysis, it said the likelihood of Black women entrepreneurs, the fastest growing rate of entrepreneurs, are likely going to be highly disrupted in the industries where they have the most businesses. Who's talking about that? Again, to what me and Dr. Jones were talking about earlier, if you're not asking the questions, then nobody's going to try to find the answers to them. And nobody's answering some of these critical questions on labor market and race, labor market and entrepreneurship, the way that correlating the way we are predicting AI to grow with the impacts on the labor market and productivity and what that does. I've heard very little of these questions being asked, and that's because there's not enough Black and brown people. There's not enough women. You know, we're not at these tables to lift this up and say, wait, look at history. Tell me why history is going to be any different in the future if you don't listen to us.
Mr. Gines, thank you for lifting that. And McKinsey has a report that came out not too long ago that supports and affirms what you're saying with regards to the disruption to the labor market. They're anticipating that by 2030, activities that account for up to 30% of hours currently worked across the US could be automated. It's a trend that's accelerated by generative AI, and that's being noted and recognized. There is so much more to talk about and so much deeper we can go on all of these topics, but we do have a limited amount of time today to be able to go as deeply as we really want to and need to. But I want to thank you, Dr. Gines and Dr. Jones. Thank you both for lifting these issues and raising these issues and making these points, because so many of us, we're not tuned in. We're not aware of really what's happening. We don't understand the depth of the implications of what's happening within our spaces. And it's through conversations like these that we're able to get more people aware, more people involved, more people engaged, so that we can have more representation at those tables, because now we're aware and can get involved and we'll get engaged. Dr. Gines, I wanted to come back to you. Again, this is a conversation about community development and current economic development, as well as a component of community development. And we know that that is a space that you currently navigate. You are already involved in utilizing AI and AI softwares. We talked about ChatGPT. It exists. It's the mainstream, I guess we can say, of AI. Most people know about it when you think about these types of platforms, but there are others, and there are others that are specific and even more beneficial to those of us in the professional space engaged in community development and economic development. In the last 5 minutes or so that we have left, can you talk about some of those and the benefits of utilizing some of those tools and why you've chosen to utilize those tools?
Yeah, I'm going to come at it differently, because I heard somebody put it the best way for folks that want to use these. So you have primarily two different kinds of AI tools. You have what we call multimodal, ChatGPT, which can do a lot of different things. And then you have kind of very particular or niche ones. So when you're looking at what you want to do, you gotta define what type of productivity you need. So when, let's say you're a writer, you're a grant writer, let's use grant writers. Then what you want to look at is, what are the tasks that you currently use for grant writing, and look at the tools that are going to be able to identify and give you those. So for example, ChatGPT or Claude may be really good for actually doing some of the writing for you, giving you a preliminary outline. You can upload like the grant requirements into it, the NOFO, have ChatGPT say, okay, this is the things that you need to include. You can upload any of your documents that you have, like let's say your budget and your report, whatever. You can ask it to formulate, format it and do all of that. So that's a good use case. You can also look at kind of like pulling over into these things, the data, that's you have, and have it do some kind of calculations and embed it in there. And while you have the plugins for these tools, my two favorite are ChatGPT and Claude. You can also do some background research if you need to pull the research. So if you need that, you have places like SciSpace or others where you literally, now you can look at all the research articles like, Doc, we could have knocked out our dissertation in half the time if we were writing it today. I'm telling you, like, I'm looking at this stuff now and I'm like, all that mess that I had to go through to get this degree, I could have shaved a half of that with these tools now. But you have particular tools that you can use. You have like presentation tools, all of these. So really, I would ground myself in one of the two main ones, Claude or ChatGPT. You also have Google Gemini, which used to be Bard. Not a fan, but they're all coming along. and just play with them, test them out. Then if you have a specific use case that you cannot find in those, there's probably a tool that you can buy or purchase to be able to do that. Like for the longest, I was using a tool where I could upload, my PDFs and transcripts and all of those different kind of things. And so really, you can find the tools, but I think you can get overwhelmed by the tools. You need your strategy. Like look at exactly what you're using it for. Look at your primary tools, let's say a ChatGPT or Claude, and see if it can do that. What part of the task that you're trying to do can those do? What can? Take what can't, go out and do a little bit of research, YouTube, Google, and say, oh, I need something that can do X, Y, and Z. Find it. Usually a lot of these things have a free version or they have like a 7-day trial. Test it out. But one of the things that I think is going to happen, because we've already seen it with this, what I call multimodality, being able to do multiple things basically is what that means. A lot of these things that were niche before, now ChatGPT can do, now Claude can do. And in the future, you're likely going to see the same thing. But in the short run, break down your task, understand what you're trying to do, use your basic platform for it first, test it out, see if it can or cannot do what you want. And if it can't, then I will go to some of these specialized AI tools, because there's hundreds out there now.
Thank you for that. Dr. Jones, do you have any thoughts on platforms that you like to utilize and you find are better suited in your space?
Yeah, so I would definitely echo what Dr. Gines mentioned. And there's so many tools that are out there, you can get overwhelmed. The minute you start to master one tool and you're like, okay, this is great. There's another tool that comes out that does it 10 times better. And so even though you might invest in one tool, you might want to jump to another tool because it can do it better. And it now is integrated with Dolly, and now it can do all these great things. So I would just say be comfortable with learning, but know your objectives and know why you want to use these tools in the first place. And to me, that's the difference between responsible AI and irresponsible AI. Play with it, become familiar, but understand and know why you're using them, what's your intent on using it, and just have fun and explore, but also be at the table and be visible when it comes to using these tools. The only way for it to learn what we need, women, minorities, African Americans, the only way that it will know what we need and what we want is when we use it. So not to be afraid of using it, but to just use them cautiously and to just study the trends. I would say ChatGPT is my go-to because most of the systems are operated off of that software. So if I'm looking at a tool, I want to know what's the operating system, how does it function, how does it work? And so I kind of want to tend to stick with the ones that are the original model or the ones that are generating the most exposure. And just be responsible. Try to understand the workings behind it, which is what I'm trying to do myself. Understand how that model works. And it's not rocket science when you understand that it's people who are behind the process. And when you understand that it literally models what a human can do. We talked about these neural networks and these nodes, and the same way that our brains function and work, the interconnectedness, that's the way these large models work. And when you can really kind of understand and wrap your head around how they work, and why they work, you'll start to know, your purpose in using it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Dr. Dell Gines, Dr. Naketa Jones, I thank you both for taking the time to have this conversation. I hope that we have people who are tapped in and listening and taking note and preparing themselves to get involved and engaged in this space. If you are a government entity, if you are a nonprofit, if you are an elected official, if you are a general community member, if you are a professional involved in community development and economic development, you need to be aware of what's happening in AI, and you need to also be aware of how you can utilize AI responsibly in how you deliver the services that you deliver, how you respond to your constituents, how you engage with your constituents, how you as a grant writer determine how to best submit documentation in response to funding and your funding efforts. It's important that you are engaged and aware in this space. Again, Dr. Dell Gines, Dr. Naketa Jones, thank you for joining us for this episode of Coffee and Chat. We look forward to our upcoming episode. Our next episode is going to be AI in nonprofit spaces, which we've touched on. We've touched on the impact of nonprofit spaces and the utilization of AI in nonprofit spaces. We want to spend next week going a bit deeper with that. We hope that you will come back and join us again. And again, thank you to today's guest. We look forward to you all joining us again as well. Take care, everyone. Until next time.